Hello and welcome to Call for Fire. Thank you all for joining us today. Per usual, we're going to go ahead and get right into it. And today we are going to be going over the fourth devotional, Be Kind to Yourself. Before I get into this, is there anything you want to preface this one with?
I think this is the hardest devotional to practice of all of them. Not only like when you're in the acute phase and you're trying to get better, but also in the maintaining phase to make sure that you maintain that you're better, whether you struggle with addiction or mental illness, or you're trying to put your marriage together or whatever. I think this devotional is really hard to continuing doing, but when you practice this, as with everything else, it may be awkward in the beginning, but the more you practice, the more you get better. So
definitely. And I apologize for my slightly nasally sound. I've been sick, so I'm shot up with all the nose spray I think I can legally handle. And I'm hoping that I can breathe clear. I just sound like I've got earplugs up my nose. So we'll go ahead and get into this one. All right. Be kind to yourself. On your new journey of putting yourself and your life back together, it is crucial for you to be kind to yourself. This is a difficult task, one I know all too well from my own journey. There will be times when you don't feel that you're worth it, worthy of meaningful relationships, or deserve blessing from God. One of the hardest things for me to grasp was how grace was a gift from God through his son, Jesus Christ. How I desperately needed God's grace in my life. There will be times where you agonize over situations in every area of your life until you experience God's grace. The more you surrender to God by living out his word, the more you will experience the results of God's grace, which are peace and freedom, as well as the ability to be kind to yourself. You will experience God's love, which will enable you to begin to love yourself and to be kind to yourself. Sometimes you need to push through until you feel stable and peaceful. Finding healthy practices and being patient with yourself is being kind to yourself. For me, anxiety was a life-controlling issue in my life. A simple exercise I started to do to help with my anxiety was breathing exercises when I was stressed. The weird thing about it, the more I did them, the more I felt okay within myself. The more I practiced, the more I was able to relax, and the stress was relieved. Practice makes perfect, they say, even though there's no such thing as perfect. If you never practice, you will never know how much you can achieve. Be kind to yourself by practicing some healthy habit that helps you grow into your freedom. And then the verses you shared along with this one. Proverbs 19:8, whoever gets sense loves his own soul. He who keeps understanding will discover good. Song of Solomon 4:7, you are altogether beautiful, my love. There is no flaw in you. Ephesians 5:29, for no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, just as Christ does the church. Lots to unpack in this one. And, maybe if you don't quite understand everything that was said in that, stop right here, rewind it, and re-listen to that. Maybe pull out your book if you own a copy. Once again, we are working from the Work It Out devotional that Mike wrote, because there really is a lot in there. And you said this was a tough one for you. It's an extremely tough one for me. And this is like one of those moments where I feel like a big hypocrite of talking about being kind to yourself when I've been in a period of my life where I have not necessarily been super kind to myself. I haven't really treated myself fairly and given myself the space to kind of figure things out. I've held myself to such a high standard that it's hard to be nice to myself sometimes. Mm-hmm. And I don't know where you feel like it stems from for you, but a lot of the time that's where it stems from me, is my expectations of myself And maybe that's learned from things that people have spoken over me. And then I set high expectations based on the expectations others have of me. But that's where a lot of my lack of kindness towards me comes from, is I expect myself to be at a place that I am not. And then it spirals into this dark place of essentially just shitting on myself.
Mm-hmm. So if you look at like what you just said and you kind of break that down, you know, so when I grew up, I had the traumatic brain injury.
Yeah.
And then I went to a tutor, and then I kept on calling myself stupid. You know, I even remember going to church and going to altar and asking God to take this learning disability away from me. I mean, I remember like all this stuff. And the thing is when the older you get, the more labels that you put on yourself and the expectations that you put on yourself. Being kind to yourself can seem like a really impossible object to like climb, you know, because you said that to yourself over and over again. It's kind of like why I believe personally it's really hard for addicts to overcome addiction is because they said themselves so many times that they were going to quit. Man, God, if you can just get me through this, I'm going to quit. And the same day or the next day, they'd end up using again. And then all this stuff of I can quit, I can do this becomes smaller and smaller and smaller. Just like when I grew up with a learning disability, I always put handicaps on myself of things that I thought I could do. So, like one of the biggest accomplishments that I have is writing this book.
Yeah.
And the biggest reasons why I didn't write it is because I had a learning disability. And I think if I wasn't called out, I'm sure I probably wouldn't have written the book, if I'm going to be honest.
Do you think that for you personally, that idea in your head of I'm stupid or because I have a previous brain injury, and like, do you think that those were thoughts that you came up with yourself, or were those things that manifested from things that people had spoken about you, like a teacher or someone with authority over you had said to you and you held on to it? Like they talk about all the time, you know, speaking positively over your kids, like telling them that they're, you know, telling your kids they're handsome or pretty and those things of like creating that positivity. Like, did you have people telling you the opposite of that growing up and telling you that you weren't capable?
For me, growing up, I grew up and I was always taken out of class and I was always taken to a tutor. So I always put that on myself of what other people were thinking of me when no one actually said anything to me. So when I would go back to class, no one would ever really said anything, but they would always ask questions. Where do you go? What do you do? And I'm just like, well, I'm learning the same thing that you're learning, but I need help, is what I would say. But when I would come home, I would ask myself, why am I so stupid? Why can't I do this? Why can't I do that? And the older I got, I realized like I was like everybody else. But the thing is I put so many labels on myself that it was really hard to get over like being normal, you know? And then when things go wrong and things don't go your way in life, you can always look back to, oh, I'm so stupid. Why can't I do this? You know, and it's really hard after you have a label to pick another one up and be like, oh yeah, you know?
Yeah. Especially like, I mean, about when you think back to it, having those thoughts about thinking about what other people were thinking about you. Do you remember about how old you were when you first started having those?
Third grade.
That's exactly where I was going to guess.
Yeah.
And the reason,
it was a second or third grade. The first time I went to a tutor was in first grade.
Yeah.
But I started putting that on myself second or third grade because that is when the tutor would come into class, come get me. And, before that didn't happen, the teacher would walk me to the tutor. So,
yeah. And the reason why I thought that was the case is, and this is not to give too much of a science lesson or a psychology lesson, but like that idea of thinking about other people thinking about you really doesn't occur in a human's brain until a certain age. Like in childhood development, like you become self-aware, self-conscious, and then you start to realize that if I'm self-aware and I'm self-conscious, that maybe other people are thinking about me and they're saying things about me, and you start thinking about other people. And it typically happens somewhere between like as early as 7, but for most people between like 8 and 10 years old, mm-hmm. that recognition of like, well, what does that person think of me, and thinking about other people thinking. And if your first thoughts about yourself are negative, like I still have issues. Mm-hmm. Because of the things I thought about myself when I was 8 and 9 years old, 3rd and 4th grade. That was when I realized I was fat for mm-hmm. the first time. And because I realized I was fat, because I had to go to the store and shop for husky clothes, like husky, yeah. Or I couldn't get the clothes that I wanted because they didn't carry them in kids sizes anymore. So I had to shop in like preteen or adult sizes. Well, that was rough. Yeah. And those thoughts, then everyone thinks I'm fat now because I think I'm fat. So if I think, therefore I am kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I totally see that, especially when it comes to something like that's outside of your control, like a brain injury. Like mm-hmm. not much you can really do about that from that point forward other than try to overcome it. I didn't know anything about dieting when I was in 3rd grade or losing weight. It wouldn't have been healthy anyways. But it consumed me from a very young age, and it sounds like that consumed you from a very young age.
Mm-hmm. I think that, well, let's say like how it is now and how you grew up believing certain things about yourself until mm-hmm. the point that you have to do something.
Yeah.
I can tell you like when I'm trying to put my life back together and I'm trying to be kind to myself so I can start to heal. Yes, that's really hard. It's kind of like, do you have a noise machine?
Yeah, we got a few of them in this house.
So imagine like you're sitting there and you're trying to have peace and quiet, but the noise machine's going off and you can't control turning the noise machine off, but you want peace and quiet. It's always going on. It's always like doing all this stuff. There's always going to be stuff going on in your life. Things won't go your way, but still you have to be kind to yourself to heal,
Yeah.
And especially when there's like other people around you that you're trying to put like boundaries around your life and you're trying to do like all this stuff. And, not everyone is going to like the boundaries that you put up. So you're trying to be kind to yourself. You're putting up with other people. You're putting up other situations, coworkers, all the while trying to heal, trying to find freedom, trying to do all this stuff. And it's almost sometimes can be insurmountable.
Yeah.
But during your podcast, you said something. You said sometimes you just have to put one foot in front of the other and you have to like climb a little ladder.
Yeah.
You have to do like one step in front of the other till you can finally get it right. Being kind to yourself is the same way. You can't just wake up and, I'm going to be kind to myself when you've been like torturing yourself for years. That's almost an impossibility.
Yeah, I noticed that in that paragraph, the last sentence of the second paragraph, you will experience God's love, which will enable you to begin. And I put a big square around the word begin, to love yourself and be kind to yourself. Because I think that a lot of people think that I'm saved, everything's better now. Mm-hmm. Or I am making a change, everything's better now. And in all reality, that's just the beginning. And I tell this to people all the time, and I don't tell them this to discourage them. I tell them this to be honest with them, because you don't do anybody any favors by not telling them the truth. Things get harder before they get better. They get worse before they get better. It's that Tony Evans sermon, you got to dig deep if you want to build high. You got to get into the ground and dig up all that stuff in order to build that skyscraper. And the higher that you want that skyscraper to be, the deeper you got to dig. And it's just one of those things that it's like the beginning of being kind to yourself generally starts with that confrontation of that lack of kindness to yourself, which means that you have to have a tough conversation with yourself, and hopefully a therapist, or I would suggest a non-family, non-friend, someone who's non-biased towards you, to help you kind of flesh out those ideas, because understanding why that lack of kindness is there is really important to learning how to be kind to yourself. And you might be able to do it all on your own through self-reflection, but a lot of the time people aren't introspective enough to sit there and flesh out a very deep, dark thing without going to a place that they can't recover from without some help.
Yeah, I remember writing this specific devotional, being kind to yourself. And when I went to Centerpoint and I got out, I did outpatient therapy for August and September. So for 2 months, I was an outpatient doing all this stuff. And what was interesting is when I was in there, 98% of the people that were in there with me were working from General Motors, because they didn't like their job. They didn't like all this stuff. They didn't like what they're doing, but GM paid them to go to therapy so they could be better. And what is interesting about what you said is they had a hard time there because they were there with their coworkers. They were there with people and all this stuff. And I remember when I went to my therapist at the time, she was probably the most brutally honest person that I think I've ever met. Was like, no BS, no, you can't sugarcoat nothing, And I had enough counseling where I could say what the counselor or the therapist wanted me to say. I mean, I've had that much counseling.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's hard to be honest with yourself, go forward, and because I'm a Christ follower. I have been my whole life. And I even see so this is August.
Yeah.
So in 6 weeks, we're going to have a men's conference at Journey Church. And I'm going to say something here that some people may not like, but it's a fact. So every year, all these guys go to the men's conference when their marriage is falling apart, and they're looking for an answer, right? So when you're saved and you're finally filled with Christ's love and you begin your journey, right? It's kind of like the same thing with men going to this men's conference, and they find an answer. They start getting momentum, right? And they start okay, I can do this. And then next thing I know, they stop coming to men's prayer. I don't see them in church anymore. And then 3 or 4 months down the road, I will see them. And I'm like, hey man, I said, I haven't seen you in a long time. I said, I tried to do Messenger, but I don't know what happened. And then said, I think I just had an emotional response, or they'll give me something like that. And I'm like, well, what happens? Well, we got divorced, when you're in a situation, I mean, even being saved, you're filled. You put Jesus in your heart, but now the hard work begins, because it's kind of like drinking water and you got an infection. You got to keep on drinking water till all that stuff comes out, or else, what are you going to do? You're just going to be like, well, I just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
That all begins with being kind to yourself and being kind to, overcoming your situation, really.
Yeah. I see this in a lot of areas of what I would just generalize as health, whether it be mental health, physical health, spiritual health. Everyone wants the magic pill. And the magic pill is essentially the one-stop shop, the one-time subscription fee, the whatever it is. Let me do this one time and everything is fixed.
Mm-hmm.
And not to burst people's bubble, but magic is not real. Magic pills do not exist. Magic does not exist. There's nothing in this world that is worth having that is not worth earning and working for. And if you're looking for the magic pill, you're already lost. And you're going to continue to stay lost and continue to lose until you're willing to accept that the magic pill is not real. And you can't just say, I'm going to go to church and I'm going to become a Christian and then I'm going to just magically be kind to myself. God doesn't fix your problems. God gives you the ability for your problems to be fixed. But it's not like, okay, I got saved, snap my fingers, magic pill. I'm a better person now. I'm no longer going to struggle with porn. I'm no longer going to struggle with anger. I'm no longer going to struggle with fighting with my wife. I'm no longer going to struggle with whatever sin is dragging you down. And that magic pill is what people want, though. They want to just go to the doctor and get a pill prescribed and feel better. They don't. How many people take insulin instead of eating better and exercising for their diabetes? And it's something that bums me out quite a bit because I used to be that person. I used to be the person who'd see the infomercial for, the certain thing and be like, okay, this thing says it's going to help me lose up to 40 pounds in 90 days, whatever it is. I'm going to spend my 3 easy payments of $39.99 to get whatever it is. It's just not reality. And I think a lot of people would say, yeah, well, I know magic's not real. I know that there's no one-time thing, but deep down inside, that's what they're looking for.
Yeah.
And you have to be willing to burn that and move on from it and be willing to say I'm going to work hard.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, if every time that I went to the altar, my problem was fixed, I wouldn't have any problems. Mm-hmm. That's the beginning of solving the problem. And just like you said, I burn out. I'll hit it real hard and then I'll burn out, or I'll get frustrated, or it'll feel insurmountable and I'll give up.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. By the way, I love infomercials. I love the guy that does Flex Seal, and he has this white paste now. He made this screen door boat. He put this white paste. One. Yeah. And so there was this on YouTube, the University of Pennsylvania did the same thing, and that worked.
Oh, legit worked?
Yeah.
By the way, rest in peace to Billy Mays.
Yeah.
He was a legend.
Yeah. So those infomercials, I'm just like, wow,
ShamWow.
Yeah. The ShamWow, I'm like, man, I got a ShamWow at home, but I never.
Do you really?
Yeah, I do. So
I love infomercials too.
Yeah.
If they had a television channel that was just nonstop infomercials, I'd watch it.
I know. I even go to Walmart and I look at the infomercial aisle and I'm like,
seen on TV.
Yeah, it's seen on TV, and they got this this bronze thing that you put on your grill. I look at that every single time. I was like, man, I should get that. I should get that.
That's kind of a perfect example, though. Think about it. We all want that as seen on TV for everything. Yeah. They'll show you all of the good. Yeah. They will show you every cool thing that it'll do, but they won't show you the fact that 5 out of 10 of these products break in the first year or whatever it is. They're only going to show you the good. Yeah. And that is a big problem with church. That is a big problem with church people. And not to point out problems with church and Christianity and things like that, is to get you in the door. They'll tell you all of the positive things and tell you like, God's going to free you from this. And you'll have that honeymoon period.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get kicked square in the nuts again.
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of people walk away. And I see this often, like, especially with like people who I've seen go through the Dream Center, where they're so busy in the Dream Center and they keep them so occupied with things, and they're so immersed in this beautiful, transformative experience. And then they get out and they have free time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all that dead noise in their head.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when everyone starts talking again. And that's when all the noise gets in
Mm-hmm.
and all the distraction. And that's when I see people start to struggle with it again. And it bums me out because, like, obviously it's not what's intended, and that's outside of the control of the Dream Center once they leave. But it's like that same idea of a relapsing drug addict is no different than an emotional addict. Like, I'm addicted to this emotion that I have. And as soon as I start trying to confront that emotion, I'm going to have this really good positive thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's going to get harder.
Yeah. I'll be like completely honest right now. I am probably one of the most self-centered people I think that you will ever meet. And the reason why I say that is because what has been instilled in me in the military is you got to have pride. You got to have pride in this. You got to have pride in that. And sometimes that takes over, what I'm doing. And then anxiety starts to build in, and then I start like moving like really fast, and I start breaking stuff, and then I start talking negative about myself.
Yeah.
And then I go inside, and that spills out into my family. And then Jenny's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, and she's like, "Go for a walk," because it's kind of like what you said, because when you first get saved, you have the honeymoon phase, then the real relationship starts with Jesus. The real relationship starts getting to know who you are, the real relationship with yourself, like putting God's word into you. Because I have to be honest with you, it's really hard for me to want to put myself together, especially in the first devotional when it says I'm fearfully and wonderfully made.
Yeah.
I did not believe that, know, but I'd say, well, this is what Jesus says about me, so it must be true. But then you struggle with God's word because he thinks that you're blessed, you're highly favored, all this stuff, and you can't believe it about yourself.
Yeah.
And then
because you know yourself.
Well, yeah, and then you know yourself, and then you're arguing with God, and then you said it best before. When you argue with God, you're the one that's obviously wrong, and then you feel even crappier about yourself.
Yeah.
And then it's kind of like getting out of your own dysfunction and that own cycle dysfunction. And it has to stop somewhere. But being kind to yourself, that is a really hard thing to practice. Being patient with yourself, giving yourself grace, because the hardest person that we have to deal with is ourselves. And I remember there's a guy named Les Brown that I listen to a lot.
Yeah.
And he has
about Les Brown.
Yeah. So he has this old African proverb that says, if there's no enemy within, the enemy outside can do you no harm. But the problem is we're dealing with the enemy inside us, ourselves,
Yeah. Yeah, we are. We're definitely our own worst enemies in most situations. Like, I think a lot of people, especially in the church and in Christianity and other forms of Judeo-Christian religion, would put this emphasis on like, oh, it's the attacks of the enemy. And it's like, no, you're hurting yourself.
Mm-hmm.
The enemy doesn't have to do anything.
Right.
You're shooting yourself in the foot and blaming him for pulling the trigger.
Mm-hmm.
It's like everything that we do a lot of the time just stems from a thought process that doesn't get checked soon enough.
Mm-hmm.
And like, this is where I don't know if non-addicts deal with this, but I call this my addict brain. And this is how my anxiety works. I will start thinking about something, and I will start having this circular reasoning or circular argument in my head. Mm-hmm. And what it sounds like is, all right, I'm not gonna use anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And here's 10 reasons why I'm not going to use anymore. And then it's like, I have to keep reminding myself, I'm not going to use anymore. I'm not going to use anymore. I'm not going to use anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And then 30 minutes later, I've forgotten what's happened. And I go and I use again. And then it hits me, the like shame and the anxiety hits me again. And then I start like going through that over and over and over again. And it's kind of like where you'll sit here and you'll have this circular argument where it always leads back to, I need to calm my brain down. And so I'm going to go do X, Y, or Z. And it seems like the only way out because it's the easiest way out.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't really know if people who don't struggle with addiction have those circular arguments in their head where they're just kind of like repeating the same things over and over again to the point where they kind of feel like they're going crazy, like that noise.
Well, the thing is everybody has something. There's no perfect person out there. Everyone has something. And I can tell you, like, for me, my anxiety is I will have a thought in my head and I will play that thought, and I even like have conversations. I'm just like, can you believe that this happened? I can't believe this person said this to me. And the thing is I will even add words into the conversation that I thought that they said.
Or you'll go over it and go, man, I should have done this. And then you'll kind of replay that conversation as if you would have said that.
Yeah. And then when I finally have a conversation to someone else, number one, it wasn't that bad of a conversation. Number two, I probably should have listened more, which is most likely what happened. And number three, when we want to have a conversation with someone and we're like, man, I'm going to tell this person off or whatever. And you worked yourself into a hustle and you're like, you're going to do it.
Yeah.
And then you finally get into the conversation with the person and it never goes the way that you want.
Yeah.
Either because 9 times out of 10, it's not as bad as you think. And then, but there is that one chance where it is bad as you think, but 9 times out of 10, probably not. Then you get in the conversation, really not that bad.
Yeah.
Why didn't I listen to the voice of reason? Because there is a voice of reason that you have, but when you have anxiety, when you put labels on yourself, 9 times out of 10, you crush down the Holy Spirit that you're not even listening to anymore.
Yeah.
Peace, patience, joy, you're not even listening to that anymore. All you're listening to is, God, I can't believe Mike said I got a freaking smile. That, and that's what you're thinking.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who does he think he is? He just sees me not smile in church, so he just assumes I don't smile? The hell?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just like what you said about really truly listening and trying to immerse yourself. It's one of the biggest reasons, people ask all the time, you guys sit they'll ask me, why do you guys wear headphones? Because we sit right across from each other. Well, the thing is my voice is coming through my own headphones and your voice is coming through my headphones. And if you try to talk when I'm talking, I have 2 voices. And the problem is the audio doesn't come through right. So it allows us to immerse ourselves truly in this conversation, not to the point where I'm distracted and oh, what's going on over there? Or I hear a noise upstairs or this. My dog is upstairs probably clicking around on the floor. And if I heard that every single time she's clicking around on the floor, I'd be like, man, that's going to sound terrible on the podcast. I'm going to have to do so much editing and post-production, blah, blah, blah. And my anxiety is going to start building.
Mm-hmm.
But I put the headphones on and it's just me and you, lasered in. Nothing exists outside of this conversation. I think a lot of the time we have another conversation going on in our head while we're talking to somebody. Mm-hmm. And that completely ruins what's going on. And then we build anxiety about what we should have done or how I could have done this differently or what I'm going to do the next time I see that person.
Yeah. I think the next and overarching theme to this devotional is when you don't see your worth, it's really hard to be kind to yourself. If your worth, you don't see yourself producing any fruit, like, you know, it's not going your way and you don't think people believe in you anymore. And then your belief in yourself is in the toilet.
Yeah.
I mean, how are you going to be kind to yourself when you don't have any self-worth?
Yeah. I mean, I went back and I jotted this down because like I was looking at the themes of like the first 4 things that we've gone over. And like the first podcast was really kind of focused around learning to love yourself, if you were to put a broad theme on it. And the second one was kind of about feeding that new self, making sure that it's properly nutritioned. And I don't mean that just from food. I mean that like putting the right things in your life. And then the third one, believing in yourself, because at a certain point you can't do any of this if you don't love yourself first. Because if you don't love yourself, you're not going to take care of yourself and feed yourself the right things. If you don't believe in yourself, well, then all of it's moot. And like at a certain point, you're going to go, why am I doing all this? And then it's like, well, I got to believe in myself. I got to believe this works. And then today it's being kind to yourself. You can't be kind to yourself if you don't love yourself. It's like this natural progression that you've built here of once you love yourself, you're going to start to care for yourself. You're going to start to believe in yourself. You're going to start to feed yourself the right things, but you have to be nice to yourself.
Yeah.
I know we've talked about this, and I don't know if I've talked about it on here. So if I have, I apologize. I motivated myself for the longest time through negativity. Like I would say negative things about myself, and that would make me want to be better than that negative image that I would show myself of myself. And now it doesn't work. Now it kind of spirals me because I start to believe it. And I go, yeah, you actually are that person. And if you do, and that's the issue is if I get to that place where I'm not in a good place mentally and I start to believe that I am those things that I say about myself to motivate myself rather than just like motivation, it's a very dark road to go down where it's like, you are a bad father, you are a bad husband, rather than like, you know, like you eat a donut. It's think about it like that scene from Dodgeball where he's like eating the donuts and he zaps himself and he's like, you fat whatever. Yeah. And it's like, you can do that, or you can be like, I love myself, so I'm going to not have this donut. Right. And it's like that two sides of it.
Oh man. That's a tough one. I love donuts too.
I would look a lot better if donuts didn't exist.
Well, I hear you there. I'm just curious, what is the question after the Bible verse in the work it out part?
Write out some healthy habits that you can begin practicing right away. So,
you know, last week, Pastor Jesse had streaks in his sermon. It's about being grateful. I think that maybe a good habit that, I probably should get into is writing down things that I'm grateful for. I'm grateful for my marriage. I'm grateful for, my kids. I'm grateful for the house I live in. I'm grateful for Rocky. I'm grateful for all this stuff. What are things about yourself that you can be grateful for? Yeah. I have 4 legs. I can walk. You
got 4 legs, huh?
Yeah. Or 2 legs,
Or are you saying that's what Rocky's grateful for?
Yeah. So you need to say some things. You need to speak gratefulness over yourself.
Yeah.
Even if you're a pessimist or you have OCD or you're a perfectionist or whatever the case may be like, I can be grateful that I do things really well, or I'm OCD, so I'm grateful for that I can clean better than anybody else. I'm great. You gotta find a positive thing and start there, even if, because if you can't find the positive things and the things that you do and the things that you have and be grateful going forward, some of the things, being kind to yourself is also being humble. Yeah. It's really hard to be kind to yourself if you're not humble.
Yeah.
So,
if you live in America, there's your number one thing to be grateful for.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are so ungrateful because they haven't really experienced what a life looks like outside of this amazing country that we live in. And look, I'm not saying everything in this country is amazing. You could live in, I don't know, you could live in
Africa,
Flint, Michigan.
Yeah.
Or Africa, like whatever it is. What I'm saying is a lot of the time we are so ungrateful for what we have because we have so much.
Yeah.
When you have and you don't need, it just seems like the standard. It just seems like what's normal. So, well, if it's just normal, then I need more than that to be happy or whatever it is. It's like enough is never enough.
Yeah, those are first world problems.
Yeah,
for sure.
Like if you're listening to this podcast, that means you have a computer or a cell phone. You're doing fine.
Yeah. So you're on like the top 1% of the entire world.
Yeah. And I don't say that to shame you. I say that to help you hopefully understand that finding those things to be grateful for is not that hard. You just have to look around. I have this beautiful gym behind me. I can sit here and complain about the fact that I don't have all the pieces of equipment that I want, or I can just be grateful that I have this amazing gym in my house that I don't know anybody else who has a full gym in their house. And I'm not saying that to brag on myself. I'm just saying I don't know anybody else who does. I know people who have gym equipment at their house, but not a full gym. Like I have everything that you need, but I don't have everything I want.
I have a rowing machine and I have a treadmill that, I don't know if it has a fast button and a slow button. Yeah. That's what I have. And I have a 5-pound weight and a 10-pound weight. That's what I got.
Yeah. And like, if you're always thinking about what you want or what you could have or what things could be, like if we want to make this more practical to talking about our emotions, if it's like, well, I just want to be happier, well, then you're never going to be happy because you're already setting the baseline for happy needs to be better than where I'm at right now. Why can't you be happy with where you're at right now? Why can't you find some sort of peace in the situation you're in right now? And I think that what you're really hitting home in with this is like, you can sit here and you say this, you can agonize over situations in every area of life. Or you can begin to love yourself and be kind to yourself.
Yeah.
Like you say some things in between there, but really it's you can do this or you can do that. And like the question that you have of like starting some simple healthy habits, you have this breathing exercise thing down. And I circled that because I do think that is really important. I have actually found that breathing exercises are a great way to calm yourself down, not because of the breathing, but because if you actually do it the right way and you're like counting out the seconds and counting out the things, you can't think about anything else because it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it's like blow it out. Like if you're doing like a square breathing technique or something, you're so focused on making sure those counts are perfect that it's like, oh, what was I freaking out about? It and the breathing helps too. There's actually some science to that, which I can talk about. But
so I do the Wim Hof breathing exercise.
Wim Hof's a G.
Yeah. So I'm up to 3 minutes and 30 seconds.
Really?
Holding my breath. Yep.
That's super impressive. Now, is that on first take or is that after like 3 or 4 takes? Because like if that's on first take, that means you could probably do like 5 minutes.
I'm not sure, but I can tell you like after I do the 3 minutes, like I can take a nap for like 4 hours. But I will say this, and this is not like when I did the Wim Hof and Eli was born, I slept for 12 hours and Jenny was like really pissed at me because I was supposed to help her out because she just gave birth to Eli.
How dare you get some rest?
I know. I'm just like, man, my bad.
Yep. So there actually is some very interesting data about breathing. And in order to do this, I will kind of paint an example here. So if you have a toddler, at some point they have become so exacerbated that they just have a meltdown and they start crying. And you'll notice that like they almost have to gear themselves up for a next level of a cry where it's like that. And then so that like step breathing, there is a term for that. And I believe it is called sympathetic sigh.
Yeah.
And there's actually, it's a double intake to a long exhale. So that, and I'm sorry for breathing into the microphone because it sounds terrible on the recording. That actually kicks on the parasympathetic nervous system, which is your rest and relax part of your brain.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's rest and relax part of your body. And it actually starts to calm you down. It removes you from your sympathetic nervous system, which is your fight or flight system. So there is actually some deep science behind relaxation and breathing. And if you're more interested in this, I would suggest looking up a podcast by Andrew Huberman. Just type in Andrew Huberman breathing, and there's probably about 2 hours on it, but go into the YouTube show notes and scroll down, and I guarantee you see something in there called like the sympathetic or like a sympathetic sigh or something. And he talks about the double breath technique. This is all off the top of my head, so I'm sorry if I'm slightly off on this, but the breathing is very important, and not to just drill down on this one. But the reason why I'm kind of drilling down on this one is you give the example, but something as simple as a breathing exercise can completely change your mindset and your mind state for the moment. So coming up with like healthy habits doesn't have to be this like go to the gym for 2 hours or go on a 1 hour walk. It's like, can I just step outside and take a few deep breaths?
Yeah, because sometimes like when you've had like something not go your way, and then you start talking like negative about yourself again, like it's so easy to do because we can't come into a habit. So you're trying to do a breathing exercise, like reset your day and be like, okay, I can do this, because I find it so interesting that we can be kind to other people, and we can even be kind to people that we don't like, but we can't be kind to ourselves, especially like, I don't know, like when my stuff relapsed and I was trying to like restore my relationships, and I was trying to like love people. How hard is it, do you think, for your mind to believe that you're speaking good over yourself and for yourself to believe it? If you called yourself stupid for like, for me, it was like 41 years. How do I believe I can write a book if I believe my entire life I have a learning disability? At some point when you are doing this, you have to put your stuff into action, because being kind to yourself and loving yourself, doing self-care, a coping skill like breathing, at some point, you need to put this stuff into practice and be like, okay, I can finally do it. Because just like we said in the podcast before, yeah, you can have a point of salvation, but that's when like the work begins. Yeah, you can have like a restored relationship. The first thing that happens is you admit, your fault in the relationship and you go forward. That's when like the hard stuff starts again. It's not like I'm just going to wake up and, I'm going to take the magic pill and everything's going to be better. That's like a really hard thing to do. And I don't know. I think for a long time, that's why I hated reading. I hated writing. I hated like all that stuff,
Yeah. Sorry, I kind of need to say what you just said, just like tripped, it was like a tripwire in my brain, and I just had like a bunch of, almost like an aha self-realization moment. And it was what you said about, if I believe for 41 years that I'm stupid, how am I going to write a book? And I just had this thought kind of go through my head of, if you have believed that you are worthless for as long as you have believed, Zach, how are you ever going to find worth in anything that you do?
And that's hard with this. How are you going to find kindness when, you don't see your worth? How do you give yourself grace? How do you do that?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm trying not to tear up here. It's hard like this sometimes, because sometimes you have these thoughts like this and you start believing like, I can let this be a moment where, and I hate doing this on like a podcast because it seems a little self-aggrandizing, but it's like, I can let this moment be one of those moments where I start to let myself go, no, you are worthless. Nothing has worth, and drop into a state of nihilism of nothing has meaning and nothing has worth, and it's all subjective. Or I can try to believe the best in myself and be kind to myself and say, if it helps one person, it has worth, it has value. And even if it helps no one but you, just to get it out there, it has worth. But like, just that thing that you said, like, you could put any set of statements in there. How am I going to do this if I have believed the opposite about myself for X amount of time?
Mm-hmm.
And we wonder why we can't move forward and we can't make progress.
Mm-hmm. It's like that. Something that's on repeat, like a broken record. Worthless, worthless, worthless. For mine, it's stupid, stupid, stupid. You can't do this. You're no good. You're stupid. You're stupid. You're stupid. And the thing is, when I grew up, even when I went to Bible college, I believed that, and that made, I didn't have any like healthy study habits. I didn't have anything like, I wasn't a good test taker because I didn't do anything like that. So when you don't have results and you want to believe the opposite, it's really hard to do that.
Yeah. While I'm on this chain of vulnerability here, because that's kind of the whole reason why this exists, this area that I've been having a hard time being kind to myself in lately has been in the fathering area, being a dad. And the other day I actually texted Megan about it because it stopped me, like, why am I having this thought? But the other day I was driving Teddy to school and I sneezed in the car. And I don't know, he's only 2.5, but I sneezed and Teddy goes, "Bless you, Dada. I love you." And I immediately got hit with like this guilt and shame of, I am a terrible dad. And I don't know why that was what I thought in that moment, why that was the first thing that came into my head. Not like, man, I'm so proud that Teddy's such a polite kid and that he knows that. It was this, you're not a good enough dad. That was my first thought. He didn't learn that from you. He's learning that from other people because you're not a good enough dad to teach him stuff like that. You're not around enough. You need to be around more, blah, blah, blah. And all this stuff starts in my head. Mm-hmm. And I texted her and told her, I go, I don't know why, but when he does things like this, it makes me feel like a worse dad. Mm-hmm. And I wish I could tell everybody here in this moment that, I came to this moment where I figured it out. I still have no idea. And it's an area that I'm having a really hard time being kind to myself in being a father, because it does not matter how well things are going for Teddy or how smart he is or how kind he is or how polite he is. I never feel like I'm doing a good job as a dad. Mm-hmm. And I don't know where that comes from. And I'm like reading this and thinking about that and just wondering, like, how can I be more kind to myself when it comes to me being a father?
Mm-hmm. Well, number one, you can see the fruit of how Teddy is. I can tell you, like, me and Jenny had a conversation yesterday, maybe it was Sunday. It's like, you are only going to have one son here. You know, you have one son. You're raising a father. You're raising, a husband. You're raising this. You're raising your girls. You're raising your girls to, how they should react in relationships according to how you treat them. And to be honest, like, I have done a lot of things wrong being a parent. But when you are putting things back together in your life and you want to be better, how are you going to be better if you're not kind to yourself? Because if you're not kind to yourself, you're always going to second guess what your action should be.
Yeah. This is why I'm in counseling, people. Because I have these moments often, and I don't know where they come from. And like I said, I need someone objective to bounce it off of. And as great as you are, Mike, it's not fair for me to put that on you as a friend, to be like, hey, since you're also here for me in this area, can you solve this problem for me? It's like, no, I'm going to pay someone to help me solve this problem. And Mike also has an opinion of me that is not 100% objective based on our friendship and our relationship together. So like, that's that moments like this, I just felt like I needed to share that, of like, this is why you go to counseling, is when you have these thoughts that you can't figure out. You can't just dump them on a friend or a family member and expect them to figure it out, especially because they're going to have similar experiences to you. And it's important to talk to people who can remain objective in it. You said this thing in here, being patient with yourself is being kind to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Can you kind of expand on that a little bit?
For me, being patient with yourself is like kind of like watching my son do a puzzle when he doesn't know where the puzzle pieces go. He has all these puzzles, and he like opens up the thing and everything's everywhere. It's kind of like you're watching Teddy do this puzzle and you're trying to have him figure it out. But you also want to help him. And you'd be like, no, it goes right here. The thing is you have to allow yourself to make mistakes. Be like, I didn't do it as well as I should have. Or you're going through and you're trying to figure it out. When you're being kind to yourself and mistakes happen, you'd be like, man, I effed that up again, man. I can't believe it. And you're like, instead of being 2 steps forward, you're like 4 steps back because of how you treated yourself in a mistake that you don't know what to do. I'll give you an example. I'm not a carpenter. I'm not a Mr. Fix-It. I'm not an organizer. One of those things that I do is I can become incredibly vulnerable and I can help people. That's like my strength. That's what I can do. I wouldn't even say that I'm a good leader. I don't think I am, but other people may think so. But my strength is being vulnerable and helping people, right? Yeah. So I've been working on a chicken coop now for, I don't know, I think I'm going on like 2 months. And Jenny's looking at it like every single day. When are you going to get this thing going on? I could have did the whole thing yesterday. But I didn't. You know what I did yesterday? I just picked weeds for 3 hours. I just picked weeds. That's all I did for yesterday. Picked weeds for 3 hours after I had a issue with my Jeep, which I'm not going to get into. And, so I will get into it. So yesterday
let's talk about how the Jeep made you pick weeds for 3 hours.
So here's what happened, because here's how my brain works, right? Jenny has this water issue at work with her drums of water. Yeah. So I decide, we have well water. I'm going to fill this 5-gallon drum and I'm going to put it in the back seat. So I did that, and I wasn't thinking of, maybe I need to secure the 5-gallon drum in the back seat. So you know what happened? It spilled. And I drove my daughter to school, she gets out and her entire book bag is soaked with water.
Oh, no.
So I get home or I leave and then she texts me. He's like, hey, I need gym clothes because I have weightlifting and you soaked all my clothes. So I go home and I get her gym stuff. And by the way, I fill the water gallon bucket back up again. And not only that, I go to Jenny's work first because I'm so upset about how I did Sophie going into school and her book bag is completely soaked with water because of my actions, right? And then this is what happened yesterday. I went up to Jenny's office, put the thing in there, didn't say a word to her. Me and Rocky left like my butt was on fire, right? Just raced over to Sophie's school to get her some clothes, right? And then I was so pissed off at myself about how I treated Sophie, how I treated Jenny, that you know what I did? I didn't do anything except pull weeds for 3 hours while I had chiggers on my legs. And they're freaking like, all I want to do is itch the skin off them. And what do you think I was saying to myself while I was pulling weeds?
You're so stupid.
Yep. And in the midst of that, I treated Jenny like crap. I made Sophie have a bad day, but I had to do something to take my mind off of all this stuff because I was picking up Eli at 4:00. So what did I do? I didn't even think of nothing. I just breathed and I pulled weeds because
Did that help?
Yeah.
Okay.
It kept my mind occupied because sometimes we need something to keep us occupied so we're not constantly thinking, oh, you're stupid. You screwed up. What are you thinking? Because that's what we tell ourselves. And you know what? The things that we tell ourselves, we don't have the answer for.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that Devo that I shared with you about the boxes.
Yeah.
Do you know when you put labels on boxes and you try to take the label off, it leaves a mark? What do you think your insides of your spiritual person is with all the labels that you put on that person, right? And you just it's kind of like what you said before. You go up to the altar, right? And you're trying to get rid of all this stuff. But somehow you decide to take everything back with you, all your stuff. And then you're pissed off at God with the relationship that you're having because you're still dealing with your anger and you're still dealing with all this stuff.
Yeah.
But all that stuff comes with practice. If you don't practice how to deal with anger and do a breathing technique, you can't expect it to get better with the magic pill that you said before.
Yeah. I think a lot of it even comes back to that whole loving your neighbor as yourself. And you're in a moment where you're mad at yourself and the perception from everyone around you is that you're mad at them.
Dude, do you have any idea about people that won't come up to me because what do you say, dude? You got a resting bitch face.
Yeah.
That won't come up to me because they think I'm pissed off.
You should smile more.
I should smile more. That's right. And that's what I heard. I went to where was I? I went to I was somewhere with Eli. I think it was at the farmer's market. And 5 people came up to me because I was smiling with Eli. So they came up to me and said, hey, you're the guy with Rocky at church. I was like, yeah. It's man, you seem so pissed off at church. I was like, man, I don't think you understand. I said, I have Rocky. I'm just trying to find my seat. I just, I want to be left alone.
Yeah.
But that's the perception that people have when they see me. They see I'm pissed off. I'm not talking to anybody. My head's down. But that is really me just trying to get into a decent space, But I get it. If perception was reality, everybody would be fine.
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of have that same thing with church stuff. People ask me, "Are you okay?" Because I don't smile much, and it's not that I'm not happy. It's just my face naturally kind of looks frowny, and then And then a lot of the time they don't realize this because I just don't share everything about my life, that I've just come off of my overnight shift and I'm going into church having not slept all night and having worked all night, and I'm dead tired, and I'm trying to just keep it together and make it to church. And half the time I don't even make it to church because I'm so dead tired. And I feel bad and I don't show up. And then people have this, idea of who I am based on what they see. And that's kind of why the podcast exists. That's kind of why what I do, because I want people to understand that if someone as simple as me can have all this stuff going on that affects the way that I appear to you on the outside, then how much more 8 billion people in the world?
Yeah. There's one of those memes that I saved to my camera, one of my camera rolls or whatever.
Yeah.
And it says what people see is like this big, huge grizzly bear. It's like his mouth is like wide open. You see his jaws, and then it's like how I actually am. Bear's like waving.
Yeah.
It's like if you don't know me, then you're never gonna know.
Yeah. Also, like on the other side of that coin of what I was saying, of you feel a certain way about yourself, and then we treat everybody in a different way. You're struggling with this thought of I feel so stupid, and then it leads to I feel like I mistreated my wife, I feel like I mistreated my daughter, and then that leads to like an even further spiral. It's like on the other side of that same coin is the opposite thought of like your view of other people is also affected by all that stuff. So you then take everything as a slight.
Yep.
Oh, they think I'm stupid, so they're talking down to me.
Yep.
And it's like that. What the whole conversation started with, if I should have said this, I should have said that. It's like we go back and we have this whole thing go on in our head of like how we should have done things differently because we didn't hear. We listened, but we didn't actually hear what they were saying. Like we were in the room, there was auditory notes being processed by our brain passively instead of actively. And it's just like how many things in our life could be avoided. Negative things in our life could be avoided by practicing and beginning this idea of being kind to ourselves. And like, I'm not very good at it. I'm trying, but like I just shared, like I'm still struggling with some things. And like one of those big things is being kind to myself about being a dad, like being a good dad, and giving myself a little credit for where I am doing well, even though I want to do better. It's like, it's okay to pat yourself on the back halfway through the race, because at least you decided to run the damn race. Yeah.
I think that too that could really be some good motivation. There's a practice that I did when I was an outpatient, when I did Center Point. There was a social worker there that said, I want you to write down all the negative things that you say to yourself in one day. Jesus. And this is when me and Jenny were separated and I was living with Brandon. And I wrote like a whole page.
I'd get sick of that so quick.
And I took it back to her the next day, and she said, now I want you to check who said that, how many people said this to you during the day. And I was like, well, no one said that to me. It's like, you mean to tell me that you went to Walmart and you couldn't find this and you kept on telling yourself that you're stupid and no one said that to you? Wow. And she's like, well, why would you say that to yourself if no one would say that to you? I was like, well, that's the power of, the negativity.
Yeah. Yeah. There's an older study, I think in like the late 90s, maybe 1997. And I believe it was done by UCLA, and they were trying to figure out how much of our self-talk or the thoughts, just internal talk was negative. And it was like the average person has, 78% of their thoughts about themselves or something like that is negative. So I don't know where that comes from. I really don't, because like fresh out of the box, human beings, we're not negative. Like, those are all things that we absorb in, that people have said about us, the experiences that we've had, all these things that we absorb into our life and say, this is who I am. And one thing about last year's men's conference was this idea of letting God tell you who you were, letting God give you your name. And I wrestled with that so much. And I eventually quit wrestling with it because I kind of gave up, because it was like, I still didn't believe that. When I feel like God told me who I was, it was like, well, I don't believe that, because that's not what I experience.
Yeah.
So it's like, it doesn't, this is what I mean by like, God's not a cure-all.
Yeah.
Because I'm there, I'm doing the things, but
yeah,
I then have to choose to believe those things and act on those things. Otherwise, it's just a spiral. It's just going to be a recurring cycle.
Yeah, I think there's an interesting way to like look at this. So me and Rocky have, obviously we're like super close, right?
Yeah.
Can you imagine if you are treating yourself like I treat Rocky, with just discipline? Like no commands, no sit down, because Rocky has a slip lead like around his neck.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's called the nylon dominant dog collar. That's the same kind of dog collar like show dogs use, like all this stuff.
Yeah.
So when I am anxious and I'm about to go into church, like it's like all the way up here, like it's Rocky knows.
Yeah.
You know, so he knows what to do. So imagine if I'm training Rocky and I don't use any commands and I'm just yanking the crap out of that dominant dog collar, and all that is happening is he can't breathe and he doesn't know like what he did wrong.
Yeah.
And he's just like, that's what we do to ourselves. We don't know what we did wrong. We don't know why we're doing it, but we still keep on doing it. Like, you know, imagine if you didn't do that to yourself. You didn't treat yourself like crap. And sometimes you don't even know why we're doing it. Just like I explain what I do to Rocky sometimes. And, you know, there are sometimes when I'm like, Rocky, just be quiet. And then, and then he'll be like, he'll start to do it. And then I'll tighten up the lead. And then all he's doing is yawning. I'm just like, then I'm getting pissed. I'm like, shh, we're in a sermon. And Jenny's just like, it's like, okay, calm down. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. We are our toughest person to deal with. And we are consistently our toughest person to deal with.
Yeah.
It's like once you can defeat that, once you can win that battle within, it's like all the other ones are easy. Mm-hmm. It's like a whole play on that, you know, there's nothing to fear but fear itself. Like, you know, the real battle is within it. All these little platitudes that we use, they have truth to them. That's why we say them. Mm-hmm. And like that, you know, fighting the fight within yourself, like beating yourself, like almost like is what it is. But it's not, because that implies this zero-sum game of I have to win or lose. It's not a winning and losing thing. It's just I'm trying.
Yeah.
And I think that we live in this zero-sum society of there has to be winners and losers. And because there has to be winners and losers, that means I'm a loser because I don't feel like I'm winning. Well, right. Where's the freaking finish line? Where's the winning finish line? If there's no finish line, there's no one to win the race. Right.
You know, Jenny hates when I say absolute statements.
I hate them too. I don't believe in absolutes. That's why I struggle with it.
So in group, sometimes I'll end group on an absolute statement when we did a group.
Give me a good example.
I don't know, but
maybe where you say like there's nothing or there's always.
I think my worst absolute statement that is true is I said there's no such thing as partial freedom. Either you have freedom or you don't. I think I ended a group on that one time. Jenny's like, you can't use absolute statements like that. And I looked at her and said, well, I did. Undo the absolute.
Yeah.
Undo it. And I said, go ahead. I undo the statement. And then we got in this huge argument in group about, and I said, have you ever seen the United States military go into a country and invade the country and not take the whole thing over? No.
Yeah.
No, we take the whole thing over.
Yeah.
It's called a complete invasion. That's why it's called an invasion.
Yeah. Absolutes are always tough for me just because it's like, and maybe it's just this humanistic modern culture that we live in, but I've always adopted this mindset of like, everything's gray. Mm-hmm. There's no such thing as black and white. And part of that comes from studying for the LSAT when I wanted to go to law school.
Mm-hmm.
And like, you have to kind of think that way, that there's no such thing as an objective. Everything is subjective, because a good attorney, that's what they'll do. Everything is subjective. There's not like, something can be like, there is no blank. And you're like, well, let's argue this. Just arguing for the sake of arguing. And then studying like old philosophers, like, Aristotle and stuff like that, and Plato, and just the way that they would argue. It was all about the argument. It really wasn't about the conclusion. So I always have a tough time with absolutes. But is there absolutely anything else that you want to talk about before we finish this one up?
I guess the only thing that I'm going to say is there's a practice to being kind to yourself. There's a practice for, I go on Reels sometimes, and there's, I think it was like 7 habits of, like a healthy, successful person. And the first 2 were wake up in the morning and spend time with yourself. And the second one was make sure you, take 10 minutes and just walk by yourself in nature. Number 3 was just breathe. Number 4 was practice gratitude. Number 5 was see the good in relationships. And number 6 was limit your self-talk. And number 7 was try not to think too much. And all those I suck at. When I went hiking lately, I have triggers all over, and it's like still it's like itching the crap out of me, even doing this podcast. So
I can only imagine. For those of you who can't see his legs, they're pretty chewed up. These chiggers, they made a mess of your lower legs.
Yeah, I was the never-ending buffet for them, and you can still see my sock lines in them. So
this was a really good one. I mean, they've all been really good ones, but this is a tough one. And even before we sat down, you said this was going to be a tough one. And I knew it was, and I tried to tell myself, no, it's going to be all right. You're going to be fine.
Mm-hmm.
But like, this is one of those areas I struggle in big time. So I knew it was going to be tough for me. And obviously it was. So I got to learn to be more kind to myself. We all have to.
You want me to make an absolute statement right now that you're going to hate?
Let's hear it. Let's end on something that'll really make some people angry.
Okay. Here's the thing that I want everybody to take away that I've heard. I don't know. I can't remember who said this. If you're a motivational speaker, you can tag yourself in this statement. They said, if you put away temporary comfort for the personal success that you want to have, you're truly living. So let's say you're putting your negativity aside and you're filling yourself with kindness. You have to start somewhere. And being kind to yourself when you're trying to put yourself together and you're trying to be on this path is extremely difficult. You got to practice.
Well, something to work on this week.
Amen.
I'm not sure. We had talked about this last week or last time that we had put one of these together, that we were thinking about doing 4 weeks on and then having like a side podcast kind of thing, like where it's not directly on the book. So either next week we'll just be chit-chatting about whatever comes up. It may have a specific topic to it. It may not. Or we'll be on number 5, which is the disclaimer rule. So if you want to follow along.
I hate that one too, by the way.
So we will see you in a week.
All right. Cheerio.